They say a man's worth in the West ain't measured by his horse, his hat, or even his draw. It's by the choices he makes when everyone's watching. That day in Dustwell Town, under a sky so wide it looked like God himself had stretched it with his bare hands, I made a choice that had every man in that saloon laughing, except me. It was a Saturday, the kind of day when whiskey tastes sweeter and trouble lingers near the door. I'd just come in from a long cattle drive, dust on my boots, sunburn on my neck, and about 3 weeks of bad decisions sitting on my shoulders. Sheriff Claiborne was at the bar, polishing a glass that didn't need polishing. He looked up when I walked in. "Well, if it ain't the lonely trail walker himself," he said with that smirk that meant he'd found new entertainment. "You look like a man needing a wife more than a bath." The men laughed, rough, rowdy laughs. But I wasn't in the mood to trade insults. I just leaned on the counter and ordered a coffee. The sheriff wasn't done, though. He jerked his head toward the corner where 3 women sat by the piano, giggling at something the pianist said. "Tell you what," he said. "We got the annual match-in fair tonight. Every eligible fella gets to pick one lady to marry. No refusing, no running. It's tradition. You can marry any lady you want." He said it loud enough for the whole place to hear. The piano stopped. Eyes turned. Even the bartender froze mid-pour. I stared at him, then at the 3 women sitting there. The first one, Rosie, was what you might call the talk of the town. Long legs, red lips, hair that caught light like copper fire. Every man within 50 miles had dreamed of her at least once. The second, Lila, was small, shy, and delicate like a porcelain doll. You could almost hear her heartbeat if you stood close enough. And then there was the third, the one sitting quiet in the middle. Her name was Mabel. She was round-faced, full-bodied, and soft like a feather pillow after a stormy night. Her dress didn't hide her curves. It celebrated them, even if the world didn't. Most men didn't look her way twice. But she had this calmness, like the river that keeps flowing no matter how many stones folks throw in. The sheriff leaned in. "Well, Cowboy, pick your prize." Everyone expected me to pick Rosie. I could see it in their smirks. I could almost hear the bets being made under the table. But something in Mabel's eyes caught me. Not the color, though they were the kind of blue that could hush a storm, but the way she looked at me. Like she already knew me. Like she'd seen the tired behind my smile and didn't judge it. So I stood straight, took my hat off, and said loud enough for every ear in that saloon to hear. I picked the lady in the middle. The room went dead quiet. Then laughter. Big, rowdy, knee-slapping laughter. "The fatty one?" someone yelled from the corner. "She'll eat him alive," another man howled. Even the sheriff chuckled. "You sure about that, Cowboy? Don't say I didn't give you a fair choice." I smiled, slow and steady. Never been surer of anything. Mabel's face flushed red as the sun set. Her hands trembled, but there was a glimmer of surprise, maybe hope, in her eyes. She stood up, nervous but proud, and walked toward me. When she took my arm, the laughter softened. There was something in the way she carried herself that made even the loudest drunk go quiet. "Reckon we got ourselves a wed-in," Sheriff Claiborne said, still half amused. That night, the little town church lit up with lanterns. Rosie danced with some rancher from out of town. Lila sat with her friends, giggling. And me? I stood at the altar beside Mabel, who looked like she'd stepped out of a dream. Simple, shy, but radiant. When the preacher said, "You may kiss the bride," I saw her flinch, like she expected me to fake it or make it a joke. But I didn't. I kissed her gentle, slow, honest. And when I pulled back, she was smiling with tears in her eyes. The sheriff clapped from the back. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. The next morning, folks expected me to leave her, like some prank was over. But I didn't. We moved into a small ranch house just outside town, a place nobody cared much for. And there, slowly, Mabel started changing everything. She fixed the porch, planted flowers where dust used to live, and sang when she cooked. She laughed at my worst jokes, and I found myself Logan too. She wasn't delicate or shy. She was strong, steady, with a warmth that made the coldest days feel like summer. A month passed, then 2. And one night, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, I said, "Mabel, you know why I picked you?" She looked up, curious. "Why's that?" "'Cause you were the only one not trying to be picked." She laughed, low and sweet. Guess that's the trick then. What I didn't know, what nobody did, was that she carried a secret bigger than the laughter that day. And that secret was about to turn Dustwell Town upside down. It was the third month after the wedding when folks in town started talking. At first, it was whispers, like tumbleweeds drifting low across the street. You seen her? That Mabel gal. She's living like a queen now. Heard she's got him wrapped round her finger. Man must have lost his mind picking her. I didn't pay it much mind. Words in Dustwell traveled fast, but they meant nothing if you had a good home and peace in your heart. Mabel never let it get to her either. She'd hum while scrubbing laundry, bake biscuits that smelled better than sin, and every so often she'd stop, glance at me, and smile like she still couldn't believe any of this was real. But one night, something happened that made me look at her different, not because of how she looked, but because of what she did. We were sitting out on the porch when a wagon came rolling up our path, wheels creaking like old bones. I stood up, hand on my holster. Habits die hard when you've spent years riding with men who'd rob a man for his shadow. The wagon stopped, and a young boy jumped down, no older than 10, clothes torn and face smudged with dirt. "Ma'am," he said, breathless, "my sister's sick. Pa said to fetch help, but he's gone to the mines and—" Before he could finish, Mabel was already on her feet, grabbing a basket and a lantern. "Show me," she said, no hesitation, no fear. We followed the boy down a narrow path behind the ridge till we reached a tiny shack that looked ready to collapse in on itself. Inside, a little girl lay pale as chalk, sweating through a thin blanket. I froze. I'd seen wounds and bullets, but sickness was a battle I never knew how to fight. Mabel knelt beside the child, whispering softly, hands steady as stone. She mixed herbs from her basket, wiped the girl's forehead, murmured a prayer, and fed her a spoon of something that smelled like peppermint and smoke. Hours passed. The girl stopped shivering, then opened her eyes, weak but alive. The boy burst into tears. I just stood there, stunned. "How do you know what to do?" I asked when we walked back home. She smiled faintly. "My mama taught me. She was the healer back in Willer Creek. Before she passed, I'd heard of Willer Creek, a mining town that burned to the ground 5 years back. Few survived. I never asked, but now I knew Mabel must have been one of them." After that night, folks' talk started changing. People began coming to our door, for help, for medicine, for advice. Mabel didn't turn a single one away. She'd patch up wounds, cure coughs, and even feed those who came hungry. Soon enough, the same men who'd laughed at our wedding were standing hat in hand on our porch, thanking her. Sheriff Claiborne showed up one afternoon too. "Heard you're running a clinic out here, Miss Mabel," he said, trying to sound casual. She looked up from grinding herbs. "Not a clinic, Sheriff. Just helpin' folks." He scratched his chin. "Well, keep helpin'. Town could use more good than gunfire these days." When he left, I noticed a strange look on his face, not mockery this time, but something close to respect. Weeks rolled by, and Mabel's name spread beyond Dustwell. Riders came from neighboring towns, bringing their sick, their old, their wounded. She never took money, only smiles and a thank you. But then, as peace always does in the West, it didn't last. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the ridge, a tall stranger rode in. Dark coat, silver spurs, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. He dismounted slow, looking at Mabel's herb garden like it held memories. "Mabel," he said, his voice low but clear. She froze. The color drained from her face. I stepped forward. "You know this man?" She hesitated, then whispered, "That's my husband." My blood ran cold. "You're what?" The man smirked. "Name's Caleb Turner. Her first husband. She left me in Willer Creek when the fire started. Thought she burned, but turns out she just traded me for a clean slate." The air turned heavy. Mabel's hands trembled, but she stood tall. "Caleb, you were gone before the fire even started. You left us, me and your child, to die." He blinked. "Our child." Her eyes filled with tears. "He didn't make it." Silence fell. Even the wind stopped moving. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to be angry, but I could see the pain on her face, the kind that only comes from losing more than a person should in one lifetime. Caleb looked away, jaw tight. "Didn't know," he muttered. "Didn't know any of that." He turned to leave, but stopped at the gate. "You got a good man here, Mabel. Don't lose him the way you lost me." And just like that, he rode off into the dusk. That night, Mabel cried for the first time since I'd known her. Not loud, not broken, just quiet sobs that came from somewhere deep. I held her till the stars blurred. Guess you didn't sign up for all this, she whispered. I kissed her hair and said, Didn't sign up for nothing. I chose you. That's different. She smiled through her tears, that same smile that had silenced a saloon full of mockers. But trouble wasn't done with us yet, because a month later, a letter arrived. And it wasn't from a friend. The letter came on a Wednesday morning, carried by the stagecoach driver who usually dropped off supplies from the next town. It was sealed with wax, no name on the front, just my ranch's mark scrawled across it in a shaky hand. The driver said, Fella gave me this at the post out in Clearwater. Said it was urgent. Then he tipped his hat and left. I turned the envelope in my hand, feeling a strange weight in it. Like paper shouldn't weigh that much unless it was carrying bad news. Mabel was on the porch, hanging laundry that danced in the soft wind. You expectin' something? I asked. She shook her head. Not a soul in Clearwater even knows me. Still, she set the clothespin down, and we opened it together. Inside was one page. The handwriting was rough, uneven. To Mrs. Mabel Turner. I know who you are. You think you can hide behind a new name, a new man, a new life. But the fire in Willer Creek didn't burn everything. Some things survived, including what you took. I'll be coming for it. A friend of the past. Her hands trembled. The color drained from her cheeks. What does that mean? I asked quietly. She didn't answer at first, just stared at the letter like it was a ghost that had found her after years of running. Finally, she whispered, I thought it was gone. I thought I buried it with him. Buried what, Mabel? She looked up, eyes filled with something between guilt and fear. There was a chest, small, iron-bound. My father kept it hidden in our house in Willer Creek. When the fire came, he told me to take it and run. I didn't even know what was inside, but when I opened it weeks later, I found gold coins, government coins. Not the kind folks earn honest. She paused, breathing heavy. I buried it deep in the hills to keep anyone from finding it. I swear I never touched a coin. I leaned back against the rye-land, trying to wrap my head around it. So someone thinks you still got it. She nodded slowly. And they're coming for it. For the first time since I met her, Mabel looked small, not weak, just weighed down by ghosts she'd kept quiet. I took her hand and said, Then let him come. We'll face it together. She smiled faintly. You say that now, but when the past rides in, it don't knock gentle. That night, we locked up the house and left the lamps burning. I sat by the window, shotgun across my knees, staring out at the endless dark. The air was still, too still. Around midnight, I heard hoofbeats. Slow. Careful. I stepped outside, heart hammering, and saw 3 riders approaching from the ridge. They stopped just short of the gate. The leader, tall with a wide-brimmed hat, called out, Evening, Cowboy. We're looking for a lady goes by Mabel Turner. She ain't here, I said. You best ride on. He chuckled, a sound that didn't belong in quiet places. We ain't here for trouble, friend. Just something that belongs to us. I cocked the shotgun. Ain't nothing here belongs to you. Before I could blink, a shot rang out. Not from me, but from inside the house. Mabel had fired through the window, her aim true. The man's hat flew clean off, bullet nicked in his ear. The others bolted, dragging their wounded friend, cursing into the night. I turned back, rushing inside. Mabel was standing there, hands shaking, smoke curling from the barrel. I didn't mean to. You did fine, I said, tucking the gun gently from her hands. You did damn fine. The next morning, Sheriff Claiborne rode out after I sent word. He stood in the yard, inspecting the bullet holes in the letter. Looks like somebody from that Willer Creek mess come sniffing for old gold, he said. If I were you, I'd keep that shotgun close. He left, but not before adding, She's tougher than half the men in town. You know that? You picked right, Cowboy. I looked at Mabel, who was sitting on the porch steps, eyes distant. Yeah, I said quietly. I know. Over the next few days, things calmed. The strangers never came back, but the fear lingered like smoke after a fire. Still, Mabel didn't hide. She went right back to helping folks, tending the sick, mending fences, and humming her little songs. And me, I realized I wasn't just protecting her anymore. I was learning from her. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she said, "You know, when you picked me that day, I thought it was a joke." I smiled. "You still think that?" She shook her head. "No. Now I think maybe it was fate. The world's funny way of giving me a second chance." I took her hand, rough from work, warm as a summer dawn. You ain't the only one who got a second chance. She leaned against me, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. The kind no gun, no gold, no law could buy. But peace in Dustwell never stays long, because the letter's sender wasn't done. And next time, they weren't coming at night. They were coming in daylight, with the law on their side. By the time the sun came up 2 days later, Dustwell was already stirring like a kicked anthill. The stage brought talk of bounty riders and federal marshals riding west, a skin after a woman surviving the Willer Creek blaze. I didn't need a map to know where they were heading. Just afternoon, the sound of boots and brass badges filled the yard. For men, dust on their coats, rode straight to my porch. Their leader was tall and gray-eyed, his star polished bright. "Name's Marshal Redding," he said. "We're here on federal business. We've got reason to believe stolen currency from the Willer Creek payroll robbery was never recovered." Mabel stepped out beside me, apron still on, flour on her hands. "Marshal, I never took a cent of that money. My father was the paymaster there. He kept it safe, told me to run when the mine caught fire." Redding held up a paper. "Then you know what's at stake. Those coins were federal issue, and someone's been passing counterfeits stamped the same. If we can't find the originals, your name stays on this warrant." I felt her grip tighten around my arm. "You think this lady stole from the government?" I said. "She's been saving lives, not spending loot." The marshal looked tired, not cruel. "I'm hoping that's true, Cowboy. But the law don't move on hopes. We just need proof." He asked where the chest was buried. Mabel hesitated, then nodded toward the northern ridge. "Half-mile up, under the lone cedar. I buried it deep. They made us ride with them. The climb was rough, air sharp and dry. When we reached the cedar, Mabel knelt, pushed her fingers into the soil like she was touching an old memory. We dug for what felt like hours till metal rang under the spade. The marshal pried open the chest. Inside, coins, yes, but not gold. Iron slugs, each wrapped in cloth stamped practice mint. Redding blinked. "These aren't government coins. They're test blanks." Mabel laughed once, shaky. "Then Pa was never hiding stolen money. He was hiding proof. He told me the mine owners were minting false gold bars to cheat the workers. He wanted to bring it to the law, but the fire came first." Redding turned one slug in his hand, jaw set. "Looks like he tried to expose the real thieves." He packed the chest, signed the warrant void, and tipped his hat. "Ma'am, looks like you just cleared your family's name." Then to me, "You married a brave woman, Cowboy." When they rode off, the ridge went quiet again. Mabel stood over that empty hole, tears cutting through the dust on her cheeks. "He wanted to make things right," she whispered. "And all this time, I thought it was shame I was carrying. Turns out it was his truth." I put my arm around her. "Maybe that's what second chances are for, carrying truth till somebody's ready to hear it." We left the chest there, buried again, not out of fear, but respect. The wind through the cedar sounded like her father saying thank you. Back in town, the gossip flipped faster than a card dealer's wrist. The same men who'd laughed at our wedding tipped their hats now. Old Rosie brought pies to our porch. Sheriff Claiborne showed up with a crate of coffee beans, mumbling that it was just repayment for them biscuits. Life went on softer after that. The hurt from the past settled into something gentle, like a scar you can trace without pain. One evening, sitting by the fire, Mabel said, "You ever wish you'd picked one of the others that day?" I laughed. "Not once. The prettiest thing in that saloon was the way you looked surprised." She smiled, eyes sheening in the firelight. "Guess you taught me something, too. Sometimes love don't come with fireworks. It comes with quiet folks who stay when the smoke clears." Outside, the desert wind carried the smell of rain. I set my hat aside, pulled her close, and thought about how strange and lucky life can be. That a single choice, made in front of a room full of laughter, could end up the truest thing a man ever did. Life after the chest and the marshals settled into a rhythm slower than the river that ran past our ranch, but sweeter than any drink I'd ever had in a saloon. Mabel and I learned the small miracles in everyday things. How she made biscuits so tender they could make a man cry. How I could finally whistle and not scare the chickens. How a porch swing could hold two souls without ever creaking too loud. The town of Dustwell never stopped gossiping, of course. Folks would walk past our gate, nod politely, then whisper under their breath, "There's the cowboy who married the fatty one in the middle." And every time, I'd grin, tip my hat, and say, "Yup, Picked the best one there was. Mabel would roll her eyes but smile that quiet smile that had stolen my heart the day she walked down the saloon aisle. She never minded the nickname. If anything, she'd tease the kids in town. Yes, I'm the fatty one. Watch me beat you at Pie Eden next Saturday. And they'd scatter, half laughing, half in awe of her fearless humor. One autumn, we hosted a small fair on our land. The sheriff, Rosie, Lila, and even a few old cowhands who had mocked our wedding came by. There were horseshoes, apple pies, laughter that rattled through the hills. Mabel ran the pie contest, and I judged, though I'd never been much for sweets. Still, I made sure her pie won. Not that she needed me to, but a cowboy's pride is strange like that. At night, under the stars, we'd sit on the porch swing, hands entwined, watching the world quiet down. Mabel would hum, and I'd tell stories about the cattle drives, the stars, the fires, and the storms. And when I looked at her, I didn't see the mockery from the saloon. I didn't see the past, the letter, the chest. I just saw the woman who had laughed at me the day I chose her, fought off strangers in the night, healed the town, and somehow made every dust-filled day feel like the first time I'd ever breathed. Years passed, gentle like the turning of seasons. We had no children of our own, but Dustwell treated us like family anyway. Mabel taught the girls who came to her herbs, the boys how to respect a woman's strength, and I taught the men how to be men worth loving. And we laughed. Oh, we laughed. Loudly, freely, like the world hadn't tried to weigh us down at all. One evening, long after the horses had been stabled and the lanterns lit, Mabel turned to me and said, "You know, I don't regret a single thing. Not the fire, not the letter, not the laughter." I tilted my hat back and took her hand. "And I don't regret picking the lady in the middle. You've made me richer than any gold chest ever could." She kissed me softly on the cheek. "And you, Cowboy, have made me seen. Seen as more than the world said I was." I tipped my hat toward the horizon. "Seen as who you truly are." And in that moment, I realized that life had given us the rarest of treasures. Love that was honest, laughter that was unshakable, and respect that ran deeper than the desert roots beneath our feet. The town of Dustwell still whispered. But this time, it wasn't mockery. It was admiration. A cowboy had chosen love over appearances. And the lady in the middle? She had proven that sometimes the heart knows more than the eyes ever could. And so we lived, simple and proud, hearts full, side by side. The world came with its troubles, its rumors, and its fires. But in the end, we had each other. And that, in a life spent chasing cattle and dreams, was enough.